We're going to go through the text, annotated commentary of the essence of the middle way. In the beginning of his exposition, great exposition on the Tantra, Master Tsongkhapa has said, the intelligent ones should find a firm conviction in the teaching of the Buddha by through training their eyes of intelligence with reasoning. And so it's not enough just to resort to scriptural citations, but by training one's eye of intelligence, as I have written at the end of towards the end of the 17th Nalanda Master prayer, by understanding the two truths, which are the ground truth, understand how we come into this cycle of existence and how we exit from it, and thereby find conviction in the three jewels, the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. By understanding the true cessation comprising the true path and true cessation, and thereby gaining conviction in the teaching, in the teacher, and so we have the lines of taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the actual refuge, and then the Sangha as the assistance on the path. Since Master Adisha came to Tibet, he wrote the lamp for the path of enlightenment, and on the basis of that, in the Sakya tradition, also in what is known as the three visions, the teaching actually is based on the lamp for enlightenment, for the path to enlightenment by Master Disha. And similarly, in the case of the Kagyu and the Nyingma traditions and so forth, we have the Lamrim, the genre of teachings, which are based on Adisha's lamp. And so there is this praise of the Kadam tradition, which started with after the Master Adisha came to Tibet, which teaches or the path to the three types of beings with three different capacities. So Buddhism has spread the length and breadth of Tibet. So today I tell people that the Buddhists should be 21st century Buddhists. So what that means is we should be able to understand and have the knowledge of the modern subjects as well as our traditional subjects, and thereby learn to be able to prove the truth of the teaching of the Buddha through reason, not just through scriptural citations. And so if you are able to do that, then, as Master Tsongkhapa says in his in the beginning of the Ngagrim Chemo, you should be able to gain conviction in the teaching of the Buddha through reasoning to such an extent that you are not led astray by opponents. So in India, there were many different philosophical, non-Buddhist philosophical traditions which were prevalent at the time of Master Bhavaviveka. And therefore, in his text, he deals with these different philosophical traditions. So, Indian philosophical systems such as Sankhya, Vaisheshikas, Nyayikas. So when the texts were written within such a milieu of the different traditions, then there is, we can see the profundity and specialty of such writings. Whereas Master Tsongkhapa's, Master Atisha's Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment, which was written in Tibet, was meant for an individual to transform their mind in a very specific way. And therefore, I find it very important to look at the Indian classical writings. Though the essence of the Madhyamaka, or middle way, is a very important text, I have found that there was no extant transmission of it, and therefore I thought it's important to have it. So, though I have received the transmissions of the 13 classic texts from Kundalama Tenzin Gyaltsen Rinpoche, from Kundalama Rinpoche, again, Rinzai Tenpai, and also from the Sakya masters like Genjen Kongka Nyingpo and Sangye Tenzin and so forth. So I've received many different transmissions of the classical Indian texts, and I found that there was no transmission of the essence of the middle way, and therefore I thought it's important to have the transmission of this text by. So His Holiness is asking the audience to take tea. So in any way, we have a tea break at 10 o'clock, or tea at 10 o'clock. So So if we could have, I thought, an annotated commentary of the essence of the middle way, and so that I could receive the transmission of that text, and therefore I requested Ken Rinpoche Gunga Wangchuk to write an annotation to the essence of the middle way. And so the essence of the middle way, which is the versified root text, and its auto-commentary, a blaze of reasoning, these two texts are very important texts. So within Buddhist tradition, we have those of the Vaibhashikas and Sutantikas who do not assert selflessness of persons, whereas do not assert selflessness of phenomena, whereas the Chittamatras and Madhyamakas do assert both selflessnesses. And so, according to the Sakya tradition, within this Madhyamaka, school of Savatantrika Madhyamakas, there are the higher and the lower. According to the Sakya tradition, higher and lower Savatantrika schools. The lower ones is the one which is Sotrantrika Savatantrika Madhyamaka, and then the Yogacara Savatantrika Madhyamaka are considered higher Savatantrika Madhyamakas, because the Yogacara Savatantrika's base or their philosophical interpretations they are more or less they ally with that of the Chittamatras, the mind on the school. So Bhavaviveka's Essence of the Middle Way with the annotated commentary. So the annotated commentary of the Essence of the Middle Way, in other words. So I may be able to finish the text in these 4 days or so. So in Sanskrit language of India, this work is called Madhyamaka Hridaya Karika. So in the Tibetan annotation, Khenpo Kungpa Wangchu has written in the best Tibetan language of the central Tibet, Uzang. So I don't know why he wrote it. If he were still alive, I should have be able to ask him why. Because if you say the Central Tibetan, then you would also have to say in other texts the Amdo and language and Kham and Uzang and the Ngari and so forth. So in the vicinity of Lhasa, there is Deep, which is across from the river, Kichu River. And so they have their own dialect as well. So this part is not necessary, I think. So usually we refer to the language that we use as Tibetan or Dzongkha or Bhotia language. So whatever name we may give to this language, the language itself is the language used for the Kanjur and Tenjur, the translations of the words of the Buddha and its exegetical treatises. So in other words, this is the language which was established by Songtsen Gampo, the ancient Tibetan king. And then, since the time of Trisong Detsen, we have the translations of the Indian text, Kanjur and Tenjur, in our language. So whatever name we may give or whatever dialect we have, it's this language that is used for the Kanjur and Tenjur. An annotated commentary on the Madhyamaka Hridaya, section 1. In accordance with the decree of the ancient Tibetan Dharma kings, the translator's homage goes. I pay homage to the youthful Manjushri. So since it would take time for people to differentiate which collection of the teachings the different texts belong to, if they were to read the whole text, such as the sutra, Vinaya or Abhidharma, and so the Tibetan kings decided that the homage should be written according to whichever collection of the three baskets the texts belong to, and therefore so that people would find it easy to make out which of the three the particular text belongs to, whether the discourses or Abhidharma or the monastic discipline, code of discipline. As it is similar to relying on a heroic being, that there would not be obstacles and that it would be fruitful, the salutation is made in the outset before composing the treatise, as thus. One who, that is a Bhagavan Buddha, taught that the reality itself, that is suchness. So Aryadevas, Buddha Palita, Bhavaviveka, Chandrakshita, Pancham Master Chandrakirti, and so forth, were followers of Master Nagarjuna, and therefore it is said the reality itself, which is the suchness, which is not examined by inferential cognition, which is not an object of knowledge of the five sensory perceptions, such as eye consciousness, not like a basis of all for the seeds, not a definientum illustrated by universal and particular definitions, not discriminated as this or that, and not an object of cognition, other than by the self-arisen exalted wisdom. So the self-arisen exalted wisdom is a word that comes across a lot in the Mahamudra and the great perfection or great completion tradition. As I mentioned yesterday when I was explaining this verse, which the Buddha uttered right in the beginning after he got enlightened, which I referred to which I actually explained, with reference to the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The first turning, which is the Four Noble Truths and so forth. And so in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, this subjective clear light mind is we come across a lot, and particularly in the Tantra. And so this refers to, according to the Tantra, the exalted Rigpa, or the primordial, pristine consciousness or cognition or awareness. And so it is not something that is brought about by adventitious causes and conditions, but it is something which has been there since time beginningless. So those conscious states of consciousness which arise following the three visions of the near attainment and so forth are the adventitious states of mind. Not a reason that is occurring and disintegrated, that is discontinuing its flow, and because of the lack of these two, it is blissful, not to be analyzed as subject or object without appearance as self, or not to be analyzed as subject or self and others, without signs or formlessness, and without clarification or representation of birth, ebbing, buoy, and so forth, etc., not observed as dual, as that is entity or non-entity, nor observed as non-dual as well. So these lines actually are similar to the salutation verses of Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So it ends with to the unerred teacher who spoke flawlessly, I respectfully, with my three doors, bow to him. Then, if you ask, what is the reason for composing this treatise? It is in order to serve the benefit on the other sentient beings by enduring the hardship of engaging in the tamed conduct, by setting the mind on the supreme great enlightenment, meaning those who have aroused the bodhicitta in order to bring them to the immortal state, that is enlightenment. I shall, to the best of my ability, express this. This is a pledge to complete the treatise, not forsaking the altruistic spirit of enlightenment. Now, to briefly present the summary overview of the treatise subject matter, it is those who have generated the sublime altruistic spirit of enlightenment, they should never ever forsake reflecting, pondering on that. So first, these are the manners to realize all purpose for oneself and others. First, regarding and not forsaking the spirit of enlightenment, thus a great affectionate love, referring to generating these four intentions. They refers to the four intentions: to lead all sentient beings to freedom, to free them, to make them manifestly enlightened, and to bring them totally out of sorrow. And great compassion referring to generating these four intentions: to serve the purpose of sentient beings, completely save them from the bad destinies, take them away from Hinayana and the lower vehicles, and place them on the right path. And adornment, great the adornment of great knowledge or awareness, which is twofold, that is, with skill in means, one dedicates all virtues to the supreme enlightenment with the correct insight into three spheres, that is, action, actor, and object of action, and with wisdom, adorning the non-objective reference of all phenomena without signs of fixation, which has no conditioning and which is cognized unborn. The seed of Buddhahood is spirit of enlightenment. Therefore, the wise will not forsake it. What would you do if you ask? By developing the spirit of enlightenment. The intelligent are courageous, that is, they possess stable spirit, and because they accept themselves to be equal to all other sentient beings, they cannot bear the suffering of others, and they persevere with the right effort, since they have the energy in serving the purpose of themselves and others, and are skilled in the right and wrongs. They watch all the blind like mundane beings who lack the light of wisdom. They see it right to liberate all these worldly beings from the filthy cycling existence of earth beneath, instead of getting cross it oneself before others. This is the first explanation of the great affectionate love. A bodhisattva who, with the sharp weapon of wisdom, cuts all bondage of existence and have become liberated, who possesses a compassionate personality for the reason that those who lack the protection of faith, heedfulness, and so forth, and suffering through birth, aging, sickness, and dying process, and so on, in this inexhaustible prison, being bound by the likes of iron chain, of attachment and etc., and by indulging in and drinking the likes of the alcohol of callousness, and falling asleep in the slumber of confusion through the faults of conceptual bandits, like desire-seeking, harmful thoughts, etc., who rob all, sparing none, who your heap of virtues, such as the seven treasures of exalted mind beings, if they are not freed from the miseries of cyclic existence, what use is the power of the powerful? It is of no use to anyone. This is the second explanation of the great affectionate love. If an individual who has achieved through the might of his or her own hand consciousness produces with his or her own desire even a small bliss of enjoying food, clothing, etc., and eats it all alone by himself or herself and enjoys it, should even that be ridiculed by the wise or learned if they see it. Chakravartin king, who enjoys the wealth of seven types of gem, and Indra, Deva, that is Chakra, the god who enjoys the riches of the gods, and together with the great Brahma, who rules over the small chiliocosms, the nectar of realizing reality as is rare even for them, thus totally severing all craving, that is lustful desire, and actively clinging to existence and liberation, turning even a small giving of material things a shared practice through skillful means, and obtaining, that is the birth and exhaustion, that is aging, and ending, that is dying, and not changed by suffering of change, suffering of and so on. In short, the ambrosia of realizing the meaning of reality itself as is, that is the deathless. What else is there other than this? Because there isn't. This is the third explanation of the great affection. Moreover, I, who am possessed till now, that is, in the times gone by, by mental afflictions of desires, attachment, etc., just like adding insults of alchemized salt to the injury of a cut caused by a weapon, I have caused much suffering and pain of killing and binding, etc., upon those patients who suffer from birth, etc., and those who have been my parents, friends, relatives, etc., in other successive human lives and in the past, who were kind to me and benefited me with great gifts, though I should benefit them in return, what other than placing them in nirvana without remainder. This completes the fourth explanation of great love, affectionate love. Giving offerings, talking eloquently, possessing, practicing, and professing, practicing, and following in action, and so on. The wise who are happy from the joy resulting from these practices benefit others will not be hurt by the suffering of samsara, which is like a blazing double-edged sword. This is the first explanation of compassion. By engaging in the path of 10 wholesome actions intensely, because they do not indulge in immorality, they will cut all doors to bad transmigrations, the hell and so forth of oneself and others. This is a second explanation of great compassion. Since they are acquainted with the view of emptiness of all phenomena too, they have therefore conquered the run of the mental afflictions like ignorance and such from their mind stream. And if such wise beings, whose gathering unthinkable store of merit and wisdom for the sake of others cause the 6 times migratory beings of hell, etc., to be seen like festivals of flowers, gardens, there is no cause for the arisal of fear of prison of samsaric existence, because of seeing many faults and shortcomings. They do not abide in samsara, and because they love sentient beings in all realms of life, they do not remain in the sphere of nirvana. And those who have accepted the ascetic life to work for the benefit of others, they, by the power of their compassion, even remain in samsara without being tainted by samsara, just like the lotus flower. Such such learned ones do not see any duality of samsara and nirvana or non-duality of them, nor do these great learned beings remain in any of the 2 extremes, yet they do abide in the 3 realms of existence, rich with the 7-fold precious branches of enlightenment, that is, right mindfulness, right discerning, right wisdom, discerning wisdom, right joyous effort, right joy, ecstasy, right suppleness, right meditative concentration, right equanimity, and the source of unfathomable positive qualities, the God of the Ram of 33, as well as non-gods, Daitya, son of Diti, pay homage to and offer gifts, and is found to turn the wheel of sacred dharma, that is, the 4 truths of the noble ones, which were taught in 3 times and 12 aspects, the white light rays of fame, dazzling with splintered pieces of pearl, and through your voice, that is, the 12 branches of scripture, like the stainless rays of full moon in autumn, you cause all 10 directions to flourish, and in order to maintain the unbroken lineage of the 3 jewels continuously, the prince of the sublime conqueror, who is the source of all good qualities such as compassion, wisdom, gods, nagas, kinnaras, and so on, with the crown of their head. So the bodhisattvas, because they are dedicated for the welfare of sentient beings until the end of space, whatever they do becomes meaningful. So His Holiness finished the first chapter of the annotated commentary, and we are now on the second chapter, which is firmly relying on the ascetic life of the sage correctly. The second, as mentioned above, thus, in order to benefit transmigrated beings of triple realm of existence, they correctly take up the firm, unflinching, tamed conduct of the unsurpassable great enlightenment, and it is very beautiful to enter it well in accordance with the mode of reasoning on the path of Sugatas itself. What is that path, if you're not forsaking bodhicitta, is great affectionate love. That is, not having malicious thought against sentient beings, and with great compassion serving to help suffering sentient beings, not feeling kind to realize the sacred dharma, great vehicle, and not being miserly in the giving of dharma. Lacking hypocrisy, their nature is honest and not being full of themselves. They have crushed arrogance and seeing dependent relativity. They mentally view the reality as is, and they are like the blind in thinking the others' faults, and they are very sacred when they make mistakes. So with regard to Buddha Dharma, since we have, it is also referred to as the primordial enlightenment. If we do not have this quality of the Buddha nature, there's no possibility for attaining enlightenment. So it's they always respect even the uneducated beings thinking, because they have Sugata Hridaya, or Buddha nature. In the future, their streams of knowledge are going to flow, grow in them. Those who are prompted by compassion give dharma, material things, and so on, as a bodhisattva is giving, without hoping for returns and results, in order to harm all three rivers of suffering. There is also a way of counting 4 rivers of suffering, such as birth, death, and so forth, of the entire mass of beings. Their desire grows for the state of omniscience alone. With the pure water of morality restraining the 6 senses, washing away the stains of 3 doors, body, speech, and mind, the crisscrossed tapestry ropes of the white rosary of tolerance and acceptance suffering, not minding the harm of perpetrators, and thought persistent on truth, and the heavy matted hair, joyous effort, and by earnestly engaging in the cognitive meditative concentration, far removed from the physical and mental indulgences, opening well the eye of intelligence, knowing the conventional ultimate truth, and understanding the treatises that saves one from bad rebirths, and vanquishes the enemy of mental afflictions, and being knowledgeable in the way of the world, such as respecting and paying homage to the gurus, wearing clothes of shame and dread of blame as well. These, if accompanied, will bind the belt of goodness tightly, bearing the dark skin of compassion, which... So Holiness is commenting on the 4 establishment of mindfulnesses. So the mind is a stream of consciousness. So when we talk about a mind stream or continuity of a being, It has to be understood in terms of temporal extension, not some kind of called a special extension. So we talk about the 3 times accordingly on the basis of this stream or the flow of time. We talk about the present year, present month, present week, and day, and so forth. But they are posited in relation to something else. So without there being something to be related with, you cannot talk about what is related to it. So in the Heruka practice, we come across this statement that the selflessness of phenomena on the basis of this mind stream, which is the cause. And when we talk about a being, the continuity of a being, it has to be explained or expressed in terms of the consciousness. And when you cannot pinpoint the present moment of consciousness, when you try to search for it, I mean, you can understand how a person cannot have any intrinsic inherent existence. Which is the wish to compassion, which wishes to benefit all sentient beings, and the pure pills of faith in the 3 jewels, such as admiring faith and guarding the doors of senses with mindfulness that does not forget everything, sits on the cushion of firm pedestal that is unshaken by the interruptions of evil forces. The great joy of entire excellent things of humans and gods, of the great vehicles, the path, and the fruition of the 6 perfections, relying on the perfect forest grove of austerity for the collections of merit and wisdom accumulated over 3 countless eons, and eating and enjoying the fruit of joy produced by the principles of the 4 concentrations, appliances of the 4 concentrations, the object domain of the 4 establishment of mindfulness of body, feelings, mind, and phenomena, reading in prayer the entire profound and vast discourse of the perfection of wisdom and search, conquering all non-virtues, and based on the 2, that is the conventional ultimate truths, reading in prayer and conquering all non-virtues based on the 2 truths. The dependent origination taught by the sun-like perfectly enlightened Buddha should be explained and ever repeated. With the flowers of practice, with the infinite qualities of praise, spreading its fragrance in all the 10 directions, I honor and venerate the sun, the fully awakened Buddha, doing that like a single day, without a pause, and in the hearth of specifically discerning wisdom, which reverses the desire for various objects, burning all the non-virtuous actions. For various objects, burning all the non-virtuous conceptions of inappropriate imitation in order to achieve the highest state of attainment. One should thus engage in the sage's ascetic practice. This is the annotated commentary of the 2nd chapter of Essence of the Middle Way, firmly relying on the ascetic way of life correctly. The third, the quest for understanding the reality. Third, to explain in terms of the search for understanding reality as it is, the being, a being to whom the nature of consciousness, which is the I, exists. That being has I because it sees everything short, tall, subtle, coarse, and so forth. And the other, that is flesh I, does not see it. Thus, for the reason the intelligent ones should endeavor in search of the I, of understanding reality of suchness, because of having known, having the knowledge I, intelligence, seeing the three realms of existence unobstructed with the flesh eye has declined. Even the blind, when desiring to look at a very long distance, 1,000 leagues, etc., and very fine factors like atoms, and will see like those who have eyes, even veiled objects like that is things. If even the thousand-eyed one, the king of gods, Indra, has no intelligence eye of wisdom, he is not one with the eye, because he does not see precisely the path or anti-path of the high status rebirth and awakened liberation. He whose eye of his intelligence is opened does not proceed in giving morality and so on, that are harmful samsaric suffering and which obstruct the body of liberation, because they long for the fruits of the visible, that is this life, and invisible, that is a future life and beyond, especially the fruits, such as the universal monarchs, chakra, etc. Then how is that so, if you ask? For the sake of, in this text, Master Bhavaviveka actually instructs us that we should accumulate both wisdom and the skillful means or method to attain omniscient state of Buddhahood. So for the sake of attaining the high level of all-knowing, motivated by compassion, they put effort in giving morality and so on, being totally free from the three spheres of logic. Yet their mind is not fixed there, not attached to that level of all-knowing state either. Wisdom nectar is a course to attain the state of non-aging and deathlessness, a quenching agent, the lamp of unimpeded light dispelling the darkness of misknowledge, as the stairs for climbing to the palace mention of palace of emancipation, and the fire that burns down the fuel of an entire forest of afflictions. And that wisdom intellect is twofold in relation to two aspects of truth, that is conventional and ultimate truths. By reason of conformity with the recognition of correct objects, there is cognition of correct conventions. It's divided into these. Even the awareness of giving gifts and so on, that is the fulfillment of the two collections of merit and exalted wisdom. The fruits of these very causes, their connection, definition, their instantation, and so on, should be understood as the cognition of the conventional truth. So Solon is explaining about the development in the process of developing single-pointed concentration. We may develop excitation, mental excitation, and when that happens, the mind should be made more somber. Whereas if you are overcome with dullness or mental sinking, then the mind has to be lifted up. The spirit, we should lift up our spirit. The cultivation of affectionate love and great compassion and joy and great equanimity are familiarized. These are attracting sentient beings through the four means of attraction and making them matured, and that which labeled which is labeled wisdom, that is based on the 12 sense fields, such as the eye, should be known as the cognition of true conventional. In order to show the ultimate wisdom, if prajna has the function of the complete breakthrough of the net of conceptions, negation and positive proof, there is the cutting of the reification of an inquiescence, utterly coming off all elaborations, individual awareness, which is not learned from others, without discursive thought, wordless because of not being an object of expression and lacking an identity itself and multiplicity itself, and being the space-like immaculate reality of phenomena. The wisdom operating in such an omnioperational manner is the wisdom understanding the ultimate. To explain that, in order to climb the top of the palace of the great liberation, which clearly transcends the three realms of existence, the rungs of stair of true convention that is without proceeding in steps through the specific and universal characteristics of all phenomena, as it said, form is twofold and 20 in aspects, etc. It is not feasible to proceed. It is for this reason that it is so. So when we do analyze how things exist, we find that things are made up of many different parts and so forth. And when we try to search for the identity of that particular thing within those parts and constituent factors, we cannot find anything. So when the wisdom searches for the reality of how things exist, if things were to have any existence in the ultimate sense, when we do this kind of ultimate analysis, then they too should be what you actually point to as being this and that should still further be examined. It is mentioned. The transcendent Bhagwan, the victor, proclaimed thus, alas, the conditioned things are impermanent, and so on, to the Shravakas, for them to forsake the covering of mental afflictions, for the removal of both the stains of covering and mental afflictions, and to all knowing it was preached to the compassionate ones, the great bodhisattvas, the great vehicle. So when in the process of critically analyzing things, the text goes through the analysis of form first. And the form is constituted of the four elements. And these four elements, of course, are not discrete, but we need to be able to differentiate and make distinction between them through their what is known as their distinct features. So, first of all, aggregates of form is examined by reason of its grossness. Moreover, the elements causes of the form aggregates are examined to begin with. Because of that very rudimental reasoning, which is mentioned already, here, earth, water, etc., which are cause of form aggregates, indeed, from the standpoint of ultimate reality, they are not elements with the essence of solidity, fluidity, and etc., because of being created and because they are things which are not their own being, which have causes, conditions, and so forth, just as knowledge or consciousness. To explain this specifically, the earth is not solid in its own being because of being its being an element, just like wind. Retaining is not the function of the earth because of its own utter created nature, just like water. If one thinks, even though there is no own being in terms of conventional reality, the earth's entity itself is of solidity, that in that case, then the act of unimpeded emerging from and submerging beneath, etc., will not be feasible on the earth, water, and so on, for the yogins who have cultivated meditative concentration there. Hence, turning into fluidity like water of the earth by the power of the meditator's meditation is untenable, because the essential nature is unchangeable. Or, if changeable, then solidity is not the definition of earth. Likewise, water, wind, fire do not have the definition of fluidity, etc., as their own thing. It is also untenable that the function of water is cohesion, fire ripening, and wind movement. For we do not deny in conventional terms that all elements like wind too equally have qualities of fluidity, etc., and since it is perceived by the bodily sense faculty, and because of all of them being an element just like the earth. So when we talk about something coming into being or taking birth, that it's coming into being, and when we talk about death, it's an ending of that life, and so forth. Earth, water, etc. do not exist substantially because it is not a whole made up of collection of many, and the constituents of the collection do not exist. That the entities like earth, water, etc. mentioned as such cannot be seen as substantially established existence, since it's just like a forest, for example. We assert that cognition having earth, etc., as its object is also not substantially existent because it has its cause and because it is doomed to destruction. Like the perception grasping the forest, which is a collection of many trees, such as shawa and junipers, etc., as a single object, etc. The denominating sound or word which expresses earth, etc., is essentially existent, is not maintained by us, since it is something to be heard, just like the sound or the word which indicates an army or forest, etc., is not regarded as substantially existent. So, of course, a forest is formed or constituted by many trees that grow together. In the beginning, of course, the trees may be small, so we don't call them forest as such. As they become big and fill the whole space where they grow in, then they become forest. It is not maintained by us that each palasha tree and spandana tree, etc., individually constitutes are the initiators or the forest. The reason is that they each also have their causes in their root, their stems, leaf, branches, etc. For example, therefore, a forest, which is a whole, is not formed by the palasha trees, etc., because that is, the definition of the forest is not completed in each of them. Just as the branches, leaves, etc. are not the forest per se. These show to the opponent, non-Buddhist Vaisheshikas, the flaw that the examples used are not flawed. Second, to show the opponent Sankhyas that the analogies, the examples used are not flawed. Hence, the Vaisheshikas Paksha, that is the word forest does not apply to an indefinite number of multiple substances, for it is a label imputed by the special cognition, just as the word vase and copper or pearl is as accepted by the Vaibhashikas. In ultimate sense itself, form is not the object that can be apprehended by the eye faculty, since it is a collection of atoms, just like sound isn't apprehended by the eye. Also, it is transmuted from the agglomeration of elements agglomerated like that of sound. Similarly, form is not beheld by the eye, since it is transmuted from the elements, just as it does not see the form of its own faculty. Also, because it is also a cause giving rise to a pleasure, pain, etc. And it is something expressible, just as taste, etc. Likewise, form is not derivative of elements, because it is constituted of elements, for example, fire, water, etc. Also because it has a cause, or it should be known like the mind, which is not transmuted from elements. Then whatever characteristics of form they may have, examined on the basis of the other words of their differing colors, blue, etc., shapes, short, etc., and configurations, atom, etc., whether they are subtle, such as lies, or gross, hill or mountain, and so on. Through the application of the reasoning as explained in the negation of these forms is to be understood. Likewise, the 3 types of sound, the 3 types of sense, the 6 types of taste, and the 11 types of touch are negated in the same way like the foregone negation of the visual sense source. In terms of ultimate reality, the eye faculty does not even look at form, because the eye faculty, being matter, is different from mind and mental factors. For example, it is like the Mount Sumeru not seeing form, or the eye does not look at form in the ultimate sense, for the non-functional consciousness does not arise, just as the skin, etc., does not. The eye is not a subtle material, but we maintain the eye is not object possessor or subject of cognition of form, for it cannot grasp its own form, just as the auditory faculty, etc., or by the reason of having nature of form like taste, etc., or likewise, such as the Sankhyas and Vibhashikas assert, there is not an eye, which is only the viewer, because there is no example of a viewer. Hence, the eye does not ultimately see the form. Therefore, how is it tenable to view a form? Because of having its own nature of viewing, it is untenable. Because of not being an essence of viewing, how is it also tenable to be viewing form? It is untenable. Even if we suppose, like the Sankhyas, the viewer himself is also a listener, for what reason does he become a listener too? He does not become it. It is neither accepted as a cognition itself, nor just permanent, because there is distinction that it can change into either cognition of form or cognition of sound, because it is not a single consciousness being, but has some duality, just as, for example, a body of another form. The eye is an instrument of apprehending form. I could do until here. The eye is an instrument, just reading translations from other translators. The reading of the eye is an instrument of apprehending form is not maintained, because if it is separated from the mind, then it is different state from the viewer, just as hearing, etc. are. The state of being viewer of this Purusha is untenable. The reasons are its dependency on the eye organ, etc., the state of transformation, reflected image of the moon in the water like the mind. How is it possible for Atman to be a viewer like mind, since it cannot be seen by the other eye? Mind manifest is not maintained in ultimate reality, just as Atman is not. Likewise, there is not seeing by mind, because there is no real entity for the things which are resembled. Mind cannot be a state of being of the agent by reason of production of the other dharmas, just like a bell. It is untenable to say the eye has light, since it is a state of that organ, just as the other organ. It is visible by the eyeball of an animal which moves at night, and it is not visible by the eye. The eye does not have the nature of pleasure, because it has the nature of entity. For example, Purusha. The eye does not reach everywhere, because it has the nature of being, just as the eyeball and so forth have. So there is also the mention of what is known as a contact, which is the coming together of the faculty, the object, and the consciousness cognizing an object. And this contact gives rise to sensation or feeling. Or rather, the eye does not have the nature of moving everywhere because it is devoted to another, just as a pot is devoted to another, or the eye does not move everywhere because it is coarse of apprehending form similar to form. The eye is not conjoined with fire because it has the nature of an organ, just as the skin has the nature of an organ. The eye is not conjoined with fire because it has the nature of an organ, just as the skin has the nature of an organ. Also, the eye, which has a subtle nature caused by the four elements, does not have the fire dominant part. The eye does not reach the object sphere because of its nature as an organ, just as mind is an organ. It is a cause, or it is proceeded from a cause. The statement, the nose grasps the object sphere which is reached, is not maintained because it perceives the external object directly, and also because it does not perceive the past, future, just as the eye does not. It does not commit the fallacy. It does not commit the fallacy of uncertain reasons because of touch, etc. For it negates the non-grasping of the unreachable object, just as the sadhya, the eye. The criticism against the nose, etc. also should be understood with unblemished reasoning. So there's an analysis of so there's analysis of movement or motion, so there's no going and coming in the ultimate sense. So because there is an action of going, we talk about someone who is going, and when there is no goer, there is no going as well. So they are mutually dependent, the going and the goer. Those three properties, that is the mind, the ear and eye, do not grasp an unreachable object. The reasons are that they are faculties and the cause of function of mind, just as nose and so forth. Following the detailed exposition of the darshan, the negation of those organs of hearing, smelling, taste, and touch should be understood correctly. This is also the method for the negation of sound, smell, taste, and tactile. It should be understood properly by the wise with the straightforward intelligence. The feeling has the nature of experiencing, is untenable from the point of view of ultimate reality because of its association with consciousness, just as thought which is other than that. So His Holiness is at the point where there's an analysis of a collection and its parts, a whole and its parts. Without the parts, there is no whole, and without the whole, you cannot talk about its parts. The statement, pleasure is an essential property of something beneficial, is not maintained, since it is produced by touch, just as something other than that. Pain does not have the nature of affliction because of the reason which is to be known as explained already. Neither painless nor pleasureless feelings or sensation are maintained, for the fruit of the sensation is craving, so just as other sensations or feelings. So when we do this kind of critical analysis, we should be very sure about the using a very subtle reasoning. Otherwise, we don't get at the point without understanding those subtle reasonings. We wish to explain the refutation of own being of the Vijnana. Thus, refutation of refutation of the essentials of both, that is Sangha and Sanskara, has been commented upon. The wise should understand that properly with straightforward intelligence. So let's have tea while it's hot, or else it doesn't make any sense to have tea, cold tea in this cold weather. So these texts by Bhavaviveka use lots of reasonings. In the ultimate reality, Vijnana is not the real entity which recognizes things, for it has an objective support, just as the Samkhya does. Or it is doomed to destruction, just as a lamp is doomed. According to the demonstration of the proofs of Nisvabhavata shown in the examination of the Panchaskandas, the 5 aggregates, the dhatus, the elements of the aggregates should be known. The sources of consciousness of the aggregates should be known also. The statement, the arising, abiding, and perishing are the essential properties of the entity, for they are conditioned dharmas, as dharmas is an invalid one, because they are conditioned and the object of understanding, just like the others. There are the essence of the entities, for I'm chewing on something, cracking it. What do you think I'm actually taking? It may sound like, it may seem that I'm having something tasty, but it's medicine. They are the essence of the entities, for there are real properties in them, is also not maintained. Therefore, meaning of the cause is not established, and also your statement is contradictory. Korpesta. Solidity is the essential property of earth, for it is the nature of earth, is absurd, for the solidity is the cause of kaya vijnana, bodily consciousness. How could the property of solidity be in its fire-like attributes? So Shandarakshita's Tattvasamgraha is something, a text which is studied in the great monastic institutions of learning. In Tashilhumbu, for example, I suggested them to study it. It is part of their curriculum. There is the transmission of Shandarakshita's ornament of the middle way, and also it's very important to study this other text by him, the Tattvasamgraha, and Kamalashila's commentary to the difficult points of the Tattvasamgraha also is very important to study. In this commentary by Kamalashila, he mentions, by understanding the law of causality, in terms of dependent origination of law of causality, we create the causes for higher rebirth, and based on the understanding and insight into the dependence in terms of how things are dependently related, we created the causes for liberation, nirvana. The essential properties of a cow are a lump, a dewlap, etc. For they are the characteristics of a cow is not maintained, for they are cognized by a special understanding, just as the properties of a donkey are cognized. If they, the characteristics and those characterized are identical, how could the characteristics be that way? Because a thing cannot indicate them, the characteristics by itself. If they are completely different, how could the characteristics be that way? Because a different thing cannot denote a completely different thing. So when I was studying the collected topics, Dutta, there was a geshe from the Serame in this monastery. So when he said Nemapuba, which is the name for one of the Vaibhashika sub-schools, the Vatsiputra. In Tibetan, it's Nemapuba. And when he pronounced that word, it sounded to me like he was saying the red-nosed, because of his dialect. There is going in ungone, cannot be accepted from the point of view of ultimate reality, for it is a process for which there is no going, just as not yet gone too. In the ultimate sense, going does not take place in the actual movement, because apart from gone and ungone, the actual movement is not in sight. There is no going in the actual movement. In terms of goneness and ungoneness, the actual movement is inexpressible because it is a process. Just like being past is a process, this is also similar to a process in the future. Since going is not established, goer does not exist. So he's not commenting here. Therefore, he goes is not maintained. The going of a non-goer is invalid, for it is disjoined from going, just as the former is. The Vaisheshikas say, we maintain the reality of the perception of a goer in the connection with an object other than himself, for the understanding of and the expression tally. For example, a person who holds a stick, we say, it is not so, because there is no logical connection between them. For in the ultimate sense, the person and the stick do not have own beings. Hence, there is no connection. The basis of going forward of conditioned things, having the spread of continuous points, are just as a wheel of fire. That rolling motion of a fire wheel exists only conventionally, but not in ultimate reality. Goers, imagined by the followers of Kapila, are improper from the viewpoint of ultimate reality, because the conglomerated thing has no real entity, and also it is devoid of nature of inward striving. The Sankhya say that the conglomerated entity is real, for it is not grasped when the function of the conglomerated is not grasped. Hence, the conglomerated entity is real, just as their own nature is. This is invalid because of their unreal existence. This way of explanation is also the refutation of the remaining actions, that is, speaking, eating, etc. If own beingness is maintained, for a bondage and an emancipation are real, then when that imagined nature is not attested, then where and how are bondage and emancipation to be seen? So there is an explanation. The text also relates these two things, chakpa and dechak. Chakpa in the sense of attachment, and attachment, dechak in the sense of desirous attachment. So there is a distinction between these two, chakpa and dechak, in Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna, and similarly it seems Bhavaviveka is dealing with these two here. It is valid to those who maintain the conditioned things do not have own being, just as Maya and a dream. However, they do acquire a special non-nature by the force of own cause and conditions. Samsara of name and form is invalid from the viewpoint of ultimate reality, for just like the samsara of external earth, etc., the state of the conditioned is not maintained. Lord. Taş. In the ultimate reality, name and form cannot be emancipated in any way because they have arisen. Similarly, its destruction, just as the external water, etc., has arisen. In reality, a being does not transmigrate nor is emancipated because it is postulated just like a house. It is expressible just like perfume, etc. But the formative forces have no personality since they have a cause, just as jar, by reason of having arisen because of its destruction, or it is knowable, just as a clot of clay. Although it cannot be pointed out exactly, nevertheless, Bodhgala is real. Although it is undescribable, is untenable, since the cause is uncertain, for it can either be indestructible but real like the best perfume, or indescribable and unreal like a color of a barren woman's child, whether it is white or blue. Thus, the aggregates are devoid of self-nature, and lives and sentient beings are non-existent in the aggregates. The wise should understand that properly with straightforward intelligence. In the ultimate reality, the congregation of body and organ has no own self, thus maintained, for it has a cause, just as a pillar, or it is accumulated just as an ant hill. Existence of Atman shall not be established by the hypothesis having the following causes, that is, by reason of having remembrance, recollection, and producing knowledge, etc. If it is argued that a body with an organ must have an own nature, then the cause is a false cause, because it's subsisting only in the paksha, because there is no concomitance of agreement. So coldness and hotness are also relative, the text says. The mind which recognizes things does not exist apart from greed, for it resembles objective support, and there is no another cause besides that objective cause. Thence, depending on the rise of own beings through one of the aggregates, the presence of greed in the aggregate is maintained. For example, when the flowers on a tree is blossoming, we say the tree aggregates as blossoming part. To say through forsaking nirvana is realized is invalid, for from the standpoint of ultimate reality, nirvana is devoid of any mark, whether it is real or unreal. If nirvana is existent, then that nirvana is a conditioned entity because of its existing nature. Nirvana is not an antidote, because the antidote is conditioned, just as the conditioned entity which is ceased to function. If nirvana is non-existent, then it depends on other things because of non-existent nature. Just as the annihilated thing, that nirvana cannot be taken as the antidote, for it depends on others, just as the annihilated thing. It is also invalid to say that it is unconditioned, since this denial has already been explained. Then, is there any distinction between this substantial, unproduced and perpetual nirvana and the liberation from consciousness or of Purusha, which is conceived by the Sankhya? The defilements are generated by the fire, starter of discrimination, and die out naturally. Since there is nothing accumulated, by what extinction does your moksha should become extinct? Where there is no birth, the discrimination is also non-existent. Therefore, both methods, that is, bandhana and moksha, the bondage and liberation, are identical. Whether the extinction exists or not, by what extinction is moksha or nirvana spoken? Having realized the emptiness of essential nature, that knowledge itself becomes extinct. Thus, non-extinct and inexhaustible dharmahood is attained by way of non-attainment. Therefore, those people who, for their own benefit, investigate dharmas as they really are, do not reply to the stinking words of wrong view vomited by the self-conceited. It is invalid to say that due to the real existence of the perversion, there is a real existence of that greed. The perversions are analyzed as being similar to greed. That discrimination of the perversions is also conventional. Since the own being of mind and that what belongs to mind is refuted. Previously, greed and the affected, that is, what is affected by that mind, do not exist as own beings. By that method, the refutation of hate, delusions, etc. should be clarified. In conclusion, since bondage and emancipation are non-existent, the entities are the state of no own being and immovable from the viewpoint of ultimate reality. The statement, the earth is no other than the nature of earth, is not maintained from the standpoint of ultimate reality, for it has a cause as wind. It also has the nature of existence as understanding. The statement, what is something other than earth, is not conceived from the standpoint of ultimate reality. For both are generated, and the essential nature of the substance of earth is similar to water, and there is no difference. His Holiness is at a point where Bhavaviveka analyzes whether things have the nature of otherness. So the I sense power and so forth do not produce the I consciousness because they are ultimately different. The theory of binary nature is not good reasoning, since the thesis of the other and non-otherness is refuted. Having utilized the rare example, the Nir Granthas maintain the binary nature of fire. However, having utilized the most common example, we have refuted it. Therefore, our lack of drashtant example does not arise in favor of the opponent. One maintains that the binary nature is established, having the nature of interdependency. However, apart from these two, what would be there? When the former is not established, the latter is also not established. Hence, this nature is imagined only for the pleasure of mind. This method also applies to the refutation of all the arguments from the binary nature of things. Thus, through the formula which has been explained, that own beingness is not established. Thus, the nisvabhavata, the own being of conditioned dharmas, has been discussed in an abridged form. In ultimate reality, the cessation which results from the intellectual comprehension is surely not a real entity, for it is a form which is eternally deformed, just as is the figure of a child of a barren woman. Here, the unconditioned dharmas do not have their own being. The reasons are that they are birthless, without a cause, and workless. There is neither the assemblage of conditions nor their dissolution. For a causeless entity, by what is that effect produced? It is like the horns on the head of an elephant, by reasons of not having been born, etc. The statement, for an unborn cause, an effect is undesirable, is thus ascertained. For example, for a cause like the flower in the sky, there will be no effect like the honeybees in the flowers. Thus, the intelligent person should know the refutation of any kind of unconditioned dharma, that is space, suchness, direction, time, and atman, etc. Those things to be known, that is dravaya, pradhana, jiva, etc., are the false imaginations of the outsiders. They should be negated by those who are proficient in reason and scripture. This is presenting the Sankhya school's thesis of the primal factor and the life force and so forth. Thus, Atman is imagined by the Siddhantas, those holders of philosophical views of the other and own schools. However, having realized the selflessness of entities, may the wise drink the ambrosia of knowledge of the ultimate reality. First, I'll have my tea. When a knowledgeable person examines the non-production of entities as they are with the lamp of knowledge, then because he negates production, the production is extinguished. Consequently, the conceptual liberation ceases. So the Madhyamaka Hridaya is not there in Chinese. And also the ornament of Madhyamaka. But Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, and others do exist in Chinese translation. So it would be quite intriguing. It's something if you could translate the essence of the middle way into Chinese. It looks like it's the first text that was written by the Madhyamaka master, touching on the different philosophical systems of India, classical India. Wensek's commentary on Sandhya Sutra, is it in the traditional Chinese or simplified Chinese? Can people read it? The Koreans told me that Wensek, the author of this commentary, was Korean and not Chinese. So I would like to ask the Chinese if he was Korean or Chinese, and the answer was Korean. Rinpoche Tsongkhapa has mentioned the Chinese abbot Wensek. But Tibetans didn't really make distinction between who's who. So because of connection between the Chinese and Tibetan emperors, when the Chinese were facing invasion from or incursion from the Mongolians or others, then the Tibetan emperor sent their army to protect the Chinese. So it's important to write the history of countries which border with other countries like Tibet. Some years ago, I met a Kyrgyzstan professor who told me that they found a coffin on top of which was laid a slate on which was written Om Mani Padme Hum in Tibetan Uchen script. So the letters were very clearly inscribed on the slate, and so it's very clear that Tibet had influence over those regions as well. And so they called Tibet Tubot. So Tibet was in those ancient times regarded as a nation with with a very highly developed civilization and culture and traditions. So here, firstly, the thesis: production from itself is not proper, even in conventional reality. Reason: because it already exists as itself. Example: just as curd has no birth from itself. And then the thesis: existence do not arise from themselves. Reason: because they have existence, just like the Purusha or beings in your own view, the Sankhyas. And then next comes thesis: the unproduced has no self either. Reason: because it is not born. For example, just like the sky flower. Tangsen or Xuanzang, the Chinese master, he went to Nalanda monastic institution. At that time, it is said that he had met Nagabodhi, who was a student of Nagarjuna, and it is mentioned that when Xuanzang saw him, he was very old. So when was the Madhyamaka Karika translated into Chinese? Around what time? In the 4th century. So very early. the own self of an effect is its cause. So the Chinese brothers and sisters, and we follow the Dharma brothers and sisters, and we follow the same Nalanda tradition, the tradition which has come down to us through Nagarjuna and so forth. In Chinese, there is no translation of Dharmakirti and Dignaga's writings on epistemology and logic. So perhaps the Chinese masters and translators found that it was not necessary to use the logic in the study of Buddhism. In Tibet, because Chandarakshita himself was a great logician, and he introduced logic and epistemology to Tibetans, and the texts by Dignaga and Dharmakirti were translated into Tibetan. And in the Sakya tradition, Sakya Pandita himself wrote the Richter, the treasury of logic. And Chaba Chögyö Sengye and his disciples took great interest in using logic and reasoning. So there were 8 great lines, as they were called. And therefore, I think using reason and logic became very prevalent in Tibetan tradition. The own self of an effect is its cause. The production of that effect is considered to be from that cause. Therefore, for existence, which are the effects, birth from themselves, their own being, the cause, the causes, it is accepted. If this is your view, then, because the cause is not different from it, the effect, like the self of that effect, the cause would be no cause. That is, cease to be a cause. And since the Purusha, Pradhana, and etc. are unproduced, what itself, not being a cause, could be the cause of what? And when the self of an existent already exists, it is useless to postulate a cause. A is produced from the same A, so the generator and what is generated become identical. If what we have said above does not refute your position, because milk exists in curd as curd, then we would claim, on the contrary, that it does refute, because of the fact that a father does not exist as a child. Because of the impossibility of dissimilar instances, it would also not be right to hold the reason in our proof formula is contradicted. Thus, first of all, it has been proven that existents are not produced from themselves. Next comes the analysis of His Holiness is on the analysis of conditions. We talk about empowering conditions and so forth, such as the eye sense faculty being the empowering condition of the eye consciousness. And when the self of an existence already exists, it is useless to postulate a cause. A is produced from the same A, so the generator and generated are. If what we have said above is undamaging to your position because milk exists as curd, etc., thus there is this much that existence are not produced from themselves. Moreover, since it is not possible that an own being can exist, what is desired to be different from that? What? It is not thought that the horn of a horse is different from the horn of a cow and the horn of a mountain. From the standpoint of the highest truth, the other causal factors, such as the eye, etc., do not produce visual cognition, etc., because they are different from each other, just like the Virana grass and etc. It is not admissible that cognition of form has the intended eye, etc., as its cause, because it is different from them, or because it does not exist beforehand, just like a jar and a woven cloth, etc., are not the cause of cognition of form. And the otherness of something unproduced is conventional truth. Yet, that otherness is not there from the point of view of the highest truth. Thus, it is grasped that origination from another entity is not proper. If you now hypothesize the arising of something that is produced but is inexpressible, then that production is useless, nor can there be the arising of what is not arisen, because it is impossible, just like the sky flower. Now, if someone were to say that, what is in the process of being born and arise, there would be a similar objection. There is no birth of something inexpressible also because it is inexpressible as to whether it is already produced or it is not produced yet, just as there is no birth of a thing other than the unexpressible. From the standpoint of the highest truth, the I, etc., are not empty as entities consisting of conceptual construction, because they are created, because they are destroyed, like illusory water or mirage. Because a non-conceptually constructed entity is denied in the same way as the object to be proved. Due to the negation of the mentally constructed entity, there is no doubt about the reason by the other non-mentally constructed entity. Although the entity, the illusion, is not mentally constructed, it, from the standpoint of highest truth, is thought to be unreal because of its being a cause of self-affirmation, just as it is a false, as an imagined entity. Because it is proved by a portion of what is experienced in the world, there is no deficiency of analogy. Or, from the standpoint of highest truth, the I, etc., are devoid of own being because they are created, or because they are destroyed, just like the Buddha made by evil, the Maras. The own being of entities is not own being from the standpoint of highest truth, because it is created, just like the hotness or hardness of the water. It is not logically proper that entities arise by themselves, that is, by their own being, and it is not seen that entities arise through the state of another, that is, as something else, just as the arising of a cow in the form of a donkey is not seen. The production of others, such as causal conditions, is conventional. Accordingly, there is no contradiction with the theory we have accepted, for the four pratyayas do not truly exist from the standpoint of the highest truth. It is not property either that what exists or what does not exist as has a causal condition because of being an being in existence and not being in existence are not effects. Alternatively, how can the causal condition of something which does not arise really be a causal condition? The cause is not what produces the result, because it is void of that, the result, just like things which are different from them. Nor is what is about to arise produced from that cause, because it does not exist beforehand, just like things which are different from them. This does not produce, the cause does not produce what is not produced, what is in the process of being produced, or what is already produced, because of the logical faults already stated, and because entities do not arise. Therefore, there is truly no cause, pratyaya, or causal conditions. What has already arisen does not attach itself to supporting cause, for then the arising of what is already arisen would be in vain. What is not arisen yet also does not attach itself to the supporting cause, because it is not produced yet, just like what has not arisen as its nature. If one says that what is in the process of coming to exist would attach itself to the supporting cause, that attaching does not exist without supporting. The inclusion of action being born is that which lacks some part is not desired. Alternatively, from standpoint of higher truth, there is no support for the mind. Mental functions is not acceptable, because it is something in the process of coming into existence, and because it is something to be perceived just like a form. Moreover, if one were to say that what has support would attach to the object, it would not be proper, because of the absence of difference of time. Thus, since the object does not exist, what could be the object of what? What has not arisen yet is not blocked, because it has not arisen. Just like the sky flower, what has already disappeared is not blocked, because it has already disappeared, just as in the case of dead person. What has not disappeared yet is not blocked, because it has not disappeared yet. Just like a lamp that is existing, that what is the process of disappears is not desired, because of the refutation already stated. Even then, what is in the process of disappearing is what is in the process of coming into existence, would be simultaneous or temporarily separate. In any case, it is not like the final mind of another half, justified because of its being in the process of disappearing. The being of entity is not logically proper, because the arising of entities does not exist from the standpoint of highest truth, just like the existence of a barren woman's child. Therefore, the dominant causal factor is not accepted. If one were to accept the dominant causal factor, would be either with the effect or without the effect. The condition that lacks the effect is not the dominant causal factor, because it lacks that effect, just like the eye sense for the cognition of words. That which is not empty, that is of effect, that is which is coupled with an effect, is not the dominant causal factor, even on the conventional level. For such a situation is opposed to actual experience. Moreover, there would be no effect. In such an effect, what does not exist for you would become the effect. So when we study the collected topics, we learn about forms and those of the consciousness. And form or consciousness is as some kind of an experience which we can tell from our own experience. if one were to say that the latent capability of the result is the result, how can there be a cause other than that latent capability of the result? A relation of the recipient and the thing to be received is not desired in the case of anything else other than cause and effect. So I had discussions with Chinese whether suppose there is a perfect womb of a mother and the perfect semen or ovum and a sperm meet in that womb, perfect womb, is it sure that life would start? And they say, no, there's no certainty. So it shows that not just the two seeds from the father and the mother coming together is enough to give rise to a life, and therefore there must be a third factor, which is the consciousness which conceives within that gamete of the two seeds from the parents. And today, some scientists are saying that there is some factor which can, in fact, impact the brain itself. And then we also have the phenomenon called thugdam, where even after someone is clinically dead, their body remains fresh without decomposing. And so the scientists are taking interest in it, in doing some kind of research. Scientists whom I know, they have started some project to do some research on it, and some Russian scientists are also taking interest in this phenomenon of thugdam. So although clinically the person is dead because the brain death, so how does it happen that the body still remains fresh? And then we can also say that there are people who remember their past lives. So this could be explained only on the basis of the mind. And within the mind there are the gross or the coarse and subtle states or nature of mind. And the gross ones, of course, cease when a person dies from one life, whereas the subtle one continues. And so there's no other explanation other than explaining these things on the basis of this subtle mind. We talk about countless billions of different world systems which come about through the coming together of the elements. And then, due to the formation and configuration, different configurations of these elements, which cannot be explained only on the basis of the external factors, but these different configurations could be explained if we are able to explain it on the basis of the karmic connection with the sentient beings who are born into those world systems, then we may be able to actually explain it better. So, of course, the theistic religious schools may have their own explanations of creation by God and so forth, but there would be some complication there, logical complications. So we explained it on the basis of the karma, which brings about the beings into the world systems, which has actually given rise to the world systems themselves. Because there's no arising of gorgeous. A possible objection: an earthen pitcher, etc., are seen as produced reasoning. Reasoning has no role to play in the case of what is perceived. If you use reasoning, the invalidation of what is actually seen and actual experience becomes something that invalidates it. By a knowledge which is similar to that of the ignorant person, the arising of picture, etc., is perceived. We do not deny such Therefore, there is no deficiency pointed out. So His Holiness is commenting on Bhavaviveka, mentioning that there is past and future lives by using examples like a calf right after its birth moves towards its food, etc. And so this is quite rudimentary reasoning, perhaps, because if these kind of reasons are used, then we may have to face some challenges. Because if you look at sunflower, it actually turns towards the sun. Wherever the sun is, it faces towards that. So in that case, does the sunflower also? Do we have to say that sunflower also has mind or what? And so. So Bhavaviveka objects to the assertion that all these beings are the creation of Ishvara. The mind of an ignorant person at the time of death does not attain rebirth because it is a mind at the time of death, just like the final mind of an arahat. In response, we say your reason would be inconclusive because of the mind at the time of death in the past is. And since recollection of a previous existence remains, that mind of the time of death exists also on account of reasoning already given. The mind at the time of death becomes a generator of another mind because it has ignorance, just as the mind of a dishonorable person generates that another mind. The non-believers might state as follows: it is not desired that body, sense organs, cognitions are produced by their own action because they are perishable, just like a pot. Therefore, the next world does not exist. However, what do we mathematicians have to do with the view that since A is generated neither by the same A nor by another, the body, etc., is not produced either by one's own action or by that of another? Either way, we have nothing to lose. How can cognition, which has completely different characteristics from those gross elements, arise from gross elements? If one were to say consciousness seen on the part of the unconscious gross elements is like the power to intoxicate, or like the fire which arises out of the sunstone because it has arisen, you still have the deficiency of analogy in your statement because there is no consciousness in the ability of liquor, and there would be a contrariety of reason in your statement because non-equivalent kinds of cause are caused. That internal gross elements are not cognizers, or that is cognition is understood because they have firmness, that is, or etc., or because they are gross elements, just like other similar entities. Therefore, the wise man should understand that
sense consciousness, which begins with womb, etc., is preceded by another previous sense consciousness, because it is one with which cognizes, just like the sense consciousness which comes after it. A calf seeks food after birth because of earlier practice or habit performed in its previous life, because it moves from purpose of searching for food. Just like a full-grown sense organ. Our reason, because it moves for the purpose of searching food, would not be uncertain due to the stone which is moved by a magnet. And our reason would not be incomplete, because the eating of that calf is actually perceived. The world is not made by God, because it is the cause of pleasure for only some people, just as the worldly lord who gives pleasure does not have God as his creator. The universe is not made by God, because the universe does not have a cause, because the universe does not arise, just as it is not desired that a sky flower be the cause of the universe. God is not the ultimate cause of universe, because he has a mind, just as a cowherd is not ultimate cause of the universe. Any individual is not the lord of everything, because an entity is produced by the totality of causes, and nothing has a single creator. Therefore, the reason, because it has a mind, is not inconclusive. If one were to say that I, etc., have God as their creator, is accepted because they are many, just like servants. We reply, because an unborn and single God has not been proved, established. Ishvara would be the opposite of that, that is, of what you normally take God to be, one and uncreated. Now, if you were to say that the I, etc., have a creator, is desired by us because they have been produced, just like a pot, etc., then in that case, the creator does not have definite particularity, because therefore you would be proving something already proved by us. Then, if one were to refer to a creator with particular features, such as eternal, single, minute, etc., there would be a logical connection in your statement. There would be no logical connection in your statement. Further, if you give an example, just like a pot for a pot, there would be an occurrence of a deficiency, that Ishvara is the uneternal, the material, and the arisen in your statement. If you were to say, as conventional truth, that as conventional truth, God is the action which causes manifoldness of the world called being and the receptacles, then the proved is being proved. That is, you will prove what we have already proved. Thus, with this reasoning, one should reject saying that the world is made by time, Purusha, Pradhana, atoms, or Vishnu. The theme here is the negation of the classification of eternalism. As Milarepa says, in the ultimate sense, there is no Buddhahood, leave alone those of the obstacles. Even God and Buddha and Dhammayakaya and so forth do not exist. If one were to say that since from the arising of the Buddhas comes the destruction of blinded vision, therefore likewise the arising of sense organs is desired, we say this is a false answer. When there is no production of entities because of the non-existence of the process of time, which we view on whose part is desired by us, that is, we do not propound any view for anyone as real. Therefore, the arising of the Buddha is considered to be an agent for making people understand what never came to be, that is, the Buddhas come into existence, in our view, only to let people grasp that nothing come into existence. If the non-God is not different from the God, how can there be not how can there not be permanence? If the non-God is different from a God, how can absence of being cut off, being destroyed, make sense? Even if one were to say that there is ineffability, one cannot decide whether identical or different. Just like that of a pot, how could there be the abandonment of extirpation, or that is permanence? Even if one were to say that that identity exists or does not exist, there is no passing over of the other in nirvana. So just as the external things could be analyzed by breaking them up into smaller constituent parts and still smaller parts and so forth, likewise, and that nothing could be found. Similarly, it is the case with the internal experience of mind. As the 7th Dalai Lama says, all these things in samsara and nirvana, when you analyze them, nothing stands to the test of reasoning to be this or that in the ultimate sense. And therefore, just like the dissipation of the cloud in the earthen sky, all these appearances and phenomena disappear in the view of the vision which recognizes ultimate reality. Since continuity does not exist, how can there be extirpation and permanence? Since that the continuity does not exist, the non-arising of continuity from the standpoint of non-extirpation and non-permanence is proper. So when you are totally absorbed in the ultimate reality of things, emptiness, then all these dualistic appearances disappear completely from your view. If one were to say the Buddha stored dharma in order to secure non-arising of sentient beings, accordingly, if the effect non-arising of suffering of that, the teaching of the Buddha exists, arising of suffering is approved by us. In response, we say, as mentioned before, that suffering does not arise. Even if the arising of suffering is admitted, non-arising of that suffering is not an effect, but comprehension of that non-arising of suffering is an effect, that namely the teaching of the Buddha. That result ought not to be self-made, since a thing does not make itself, and because X does not have contact with Y's action, it is not desired that a thing is made by another. Because of the impossibility of spiritual essence, sattva, that is, etc., it is not desired that suffering be born from its own continuity. And because it is not a real entity, it does not have distinction, there is no suffering in continuity. So His Holiness stops at so the text is on page 36. Just as we perceive water in mirage. Chapter 3, still. Verse number... I couldn't get there. So you have the text. When you are back in your rooms, read the book.